fellow humans. What is the yoga mat? And why does this inanimate object hold the power to change lives? To shed the conditioned mind that has us running in circles, acting like an insane person, and creating a false definition of who we are. How does this mat that I carry with me to airports, countries, everywhere really, reconnect me with the energy of my 37 trillion vibrating cells, each holding my essence, my soul, my consciousness, that when that connection is made, it steps forth and connects me to all living things and to all the energy in the universe. Why is the mat the place where I feel the safest and most connected to myself? I'll tell you why. But in order for me to do so, I need you to do something for me. Take a step back and remove all the layers that will try and filter the words that follow. So remove your judgments, your labels, your stereotypes, your thoughts on this subject, your biases, and just listen. Before I take you onto the journey of the mat, I understand that the world we live in right now is plagued with conflict and violence, and the threat of a war sits at our doorstep. In that context, one may wonder why I'm choosing to focus on internal change in me, when in the external world, chaos reigns. Here is why. The human species, in the grander scheme of existence, is just a dot. A new species that on the evolutionary scale is still close to the beginning. What we see happening around us is a narrative created by us, by our ego, that as a species we must go through to bring us back to that higher consciousness that we once had but lost when the thinking mind, the frontal cortex, evolved in us. We started out connected to our soul, which is also known as our consciousness, as all other living species in this world. But as our frontal cortex, our thinking brain, evolved, we buried our soul with layers and layers of ignorance and allowed our ego to step forth. Where once we led from our soul and our connection to the energy around us, with the rise of the thinking brain, we began to lead from our ego, our conditioned mind that sought to create peace and happiness by trying to fulfill our desires, by connecting to the things external to us, mostly inanimate objects, which led to great discord in us, as the external is always elusive and always changing. What we see happening around us is part of our evolutionary journey. The journey of suffering we as a collective will have to go through to understand that all these narratives are just illusions we have created, in search of peace, happiness, and connectivity. Not fully understanding that these can only be truly reached by connecting to our soul and shedding the conditioned mind and its manifestation through the ego. So the only thing I can do in the midst of this chaotic suffering we, humanity, continue to experience by way of wars, conflicts, stress, pandemics, epidemics, is to change me. And when that happens, it will by its very nature create change in others. And so the ripple of change will spread. And this is where the yoga mat comes into the story of change. The mat is the place where I practice my asanas, where I meet my breath, where I meditate, and where I reconnect my body with my mind and my soul. The first thing I do when I arrive on my mat is to come into a comfortable seated position. I move my butt cheeks out and back and connect my sitting bones to the earth. I raise the crown of my head up towards the sky, lengthening my spine, opening my chest. Relax my face, and then just be aware of where I am. The sounds that surround me, the feel of my body on the ground, my presence in the space around me, knowing that I am not separate from that space, but within it. As a way of bringing me completely into the present moment, because in this life, there's only ever this moment. I then walk up my body and into my head and gently turn down the volume and drop into my body. as I shift from thinking to feeling. I acknowledge where my body is at this moment in my life, where I feel heavy, where I am light. Where are my limitations? And then I take a moment to just give love and acceptance to my body and to not sit in judgment of it. Because who I am is not my body. Though my body will age, my soul will remain as young as I allow it to. My body is a vessel to which I will give care, kindness, and compassion to, but I will not attach my sense of being to it. So for just a moment, I sit in awareness of my body and accept that all I cannot change in it, and acknowledge the areas in which I can create change through movement and positive thought. From there, I gently walk into my head, have a seat, and watch the cinema screen that are my thoughts. I watch them as if I were merely an observer watching the movie of another, without any attachments or judgments. What are my thoughts? Where do they keep pulling me to? Where are they coming from? Whose thoughts are they really? Because this is what I know. When I was born a wee little baby, I came into this world with an essence, my soul, that had etched on it the history of my soul, and it was connected to all the energy in the universe. Because I too was merely vibrating energy, not separate from the energies that surrounded me, but a part of it. On that soul, my soul, lay a blank slate, and I needed no other knowledge than that which I arrived with. But as other humans began to walk in and out of my life, they took a pen or a chalk and they wrote on my slate their thoughts and their thoughts about their thoughts. Many wrote their stories of fear, insecurity, anger, hurt, jealousy on my slate. And then when our relationship came to an end, they did not erase what they had written on me, but left me with their burdens. Then there was culture, in my case, Indian culture. It walked into my life like the Goliath it was and wrote all its expectations on me, knowing full well the impossibility of the task. Then there was the movies and music that snuck in through the back door of my limbic emotional brain and hippocampus hard drive, and wrote their ideas of love, success, and beauty all over my slate. The 101 rules of relationships that people from all cultures etched into me, and of course, society, that dropped by every day and wrote a new label and a list of behaviors and expectations attached to them. And what they all created in my mind was pure chaos. As I began to sit on my mat and observe my slate, I realized that this idea of who I am was just an illusion, created by every actor and actress who had walked onto my movie set and influenced my script. Now, when you have lived in as many countries and cultures as I have, and had relationships with men from multiple cultures and religious backgrounds, that script, which I thought was me, became a constant firework of disorientation. A self that was defined by my looks, my body, my job, my roles as a sister, an Indian, a daughter, friend, teacher, by what I owned, what I drove, the things I wear, who I date, what I read, the music I listen to, my hair, the color of my skin, my culture, and the list goes on and on and on. Each a box defined by thoughts and ideas of others. And then, of course, all those things were constantly changing, so I was forever trying to understand who I was, which gave rise to fear, stress, anxiety, and a feeling of being very ungrounded. Now, of course, this whole movie was not played out in one sitting of the mat, or that mat would have become a place I went to become crazy. So each day when I came to my mat, I sat for a few minutes and just observed the movie that was my life, so I could begin to understand the source of my discontentment. It is interesting how so many of us live in the past with our thoughts when really the past does not exist, as there's only ever this moment. And yet we prefer to live in past thoughts than in the present moment. And by doing this, we doom ourselves to stagnation because we never really move forward in our personal evolution. If your thoughts keep moving to the past, then your present will be a reflection of your past. Your future is based on your present, and if in the present you are in your past, then your future will look like your past. And you will be stuck in a washing machine of living the same life over and over again. The actors and actress may change, your job may change, but your experience of them and interaction with them will remain the same. Once I had taken a moment to observe where my thoughts were, I then shifted my awareness to my breath, the thing that would anchor me, that would ground me and guide me through this journey, safely. Without influencing my breath, I just observed where my breath was rising from in me. Did it well up from my belly or my chest? Did it start and stop? Or did it make its way in and out of me through my nose or my mouth? Was it constant? What was my breath telling me about me? When we are anxious and filled with fear, our breath will be shallow, fast, and erratic. When we sit in peace, it will be slow and constant. So by observing my breath, I was observing me. When my mind wandered, I did not resist. I just let it wander away, observed where it wanted to go, and then I pulled it back to my breath, knowing that only in the singular focus of my breath would I be able to hear my soul, and all I had to do was just listen. From there, I began to influence my breath. I took long, slow inhales and long, slow exhales, each breath moving up from my belly to the crown of my head and back down to the base of my belly. Understanding that as I did this, I was slowly moving myself into a state of calmness, into my parasympathetic nervous system. For only in this state could I move into the physical practice of yoga. As in any other state, I would be agitated, my breath would be erratic, and I would most likely cause more harm than benefit to my body, depriving my muscles of oxygen and blood but still asking them to do work. As my breath slowed, so did my mind, and it was then that I was ready to set my intention for my practice. Placing my hands on my heart, I set an intention for a change I wanted to see in myself, understanding that to change my reality, I had to start with me. And to start with me meant not only to begin to erase the slate, but to break the behaviors in me that had become habits, many of which I was not even conscious of. Some had even moved into addictions. Because every day I rode the same neurological pathways in my body, the same way we drive the same route to work, follow the same routines every morning, until it is so etched into us that we are following our body and mind unconsciously, rather than our mind and our body following our soul with awareness. We've become so used to a pattern of behavior and thoughts that many of us become addicted to feelings of suffering, fear, complaining, anger, and so forth. When I really started to observe my thoughts on the mat and my behaviors off the mat, I was amazed at how so much of my days were spent moving through behaviors and actions without me really being conscious of them, and therefore not understanding the source of them or acknowledging how harmful many of them were to my well-being. So in my intentions, I began to plant new seeds, to cut down the old, large, twisted trees filled with thoughts and habits, many of whose roots grew back to my childhood, and began to replace them with a new garden of thoughts and perspective that were planted and grown by me and watered by my soul. Here is what that intention sounded like. I intend to live my life with peace and happiness, to acknowledge that I am the source of my happiness and security, to lead every word, action, behavior from a place of love and light and never from fear, to always remember that all I am is vibrating energy, so to vibrate at the frequency of love and light, to know I am worthy of love and enough just the way I am, and to engage in relationships that add to me and never ever subtract from me. I then began my physical practice with an Om or two, using the Om to create a vibration in me to gently begin to move energy within me. The M is always the longest, because as it resonates through my throat, it massages my vagus nerve, the most influential parasympathetic calming nerve in our body. And it gives rise to a vibration in my head to massage all those glands that are responsible for the beneficial hormones and chemicals that flood our body. I chose the physical practice depending on what my body, mind, and soul needed at that particular moment. If I sought introspection and calmness in a day that had been energetically draining, I chose a yin practice, aimed at all my connective tissues, bones, ligaments, tendons, fascia, and at calming my mind and breath through the singular focus on one thing, my breath. If I needed healing and rejuvenating, I engaged in restorative yoga. If I had a day of much sitting, restlessness, anxiety, and fear, I did yang yoga filled with more movement for my muscles. Each practice in its own way sought to realign my body back to its natural state and unravel the hose pipes, meridians, nadis, of energy that ran through me. I used my breath and focus to move that energy, to send oxygen to every part of my body, and to remove toxins. And as I moved, I opened creativity and space within me as my body danced with my soul and my breath and my mind. And as I opened my body, I started to release trapped emotions, thoughts, traumas that had been held in every cell in my body and in my bones. Because cells remember everything. I observed what arose to the top, objectively of course, let go of them, and then always came back to my breath. Always coming back to my breath. And in that space between my breaths, I connected to the I, the soul, the essence that resided within me, that was me. On my mat, there were no judgments, no expectations, no ego. There was just me and my breath. The world dropped away. The walls that had suffocated and trapped me crumbled, and I began to feel light, almost as if I could fly. Each pose opened me, removed heaviness, created space within me, which I then filled with light. I began to understand that this was my journey. In every relationship I had where the other had hurt me, put me down, suffocated me, my error had been to focus on them and what they were doing to me, instead of having the awareness in the relationship I chose. They came into my life for a reason. To teach me something about myself, to learn a lesson, because only then could I begin to move my soul forward. Too often I fell into the trap of blaming the other, of making excuses why I stayed. Because of kids, because of a job, because of the house, because I felt sorry for the other. When really I should have left because I am important. When really what I needed to do was shift the attention back on me and ask myself, what was it in me that made me stay in something so unhealthy? What was it in me that attracted that relationship in the first place, that allowed me to be treated without respect, kindness, compassion, and love? Why did I not love myself or feel I was worthy of better? Only months after coming to my mat did I understand that we can never really move forward until we are really ready to look at ourselves and acknowledge our fallibilities, insecurities, fears. To hold ourselves responsible for our actions and to stop giving our attention and energy to the other, to blame the other, instead to look within. Coming to my mat gave me a safe space to engage in that awareness and introspection that I had avoided for so long. There were and still are days when I cry through my practice because my mat allows me to move through all my emotions that are rising to the surface in a healthy way. And bit by bit, day by day, I realized no one could take my power away unless I allowed them to. But that knowledge only came with awareness and understanding that all that was written on my script was other people's writings that I had taken on as my own. So every time I stepped on the mat, I began to let go and erase all that ignorance others had presented me with. And in my breath, I began to connect with my energy, my consciousness, my soul. And when I stepped off my mat, I became more and more present in my life as my mind no longer dwelled in the past or the thoughts of others who made me think I was not enough. In being present and aware, I began to feel and connect with the energy of nature in its entirety. Animals, mostly birds, began to appear everywhere that I went. The noises in my mind spent more and more time on mute, and I began to lead from my soul, which meant I led from love and light. On my mat, I had no choice but to sit in silence and to listen, because I did not play music or sit in places where my attention was continually drawn away from me. And as this became easier, I found that I reduced the noise in my life that I had once used to drown out my crying soul that was asking me to listen to it. I no longer needed the noise of TV, music, people. Instead, silence was something I sought and not ran away from, because I was learning to find peace in that silence. The more I let go of all those things that did not serve me well and replaced them with thoughts that lifted me, and then eventually in a state of just being. As I moved through my practice, I understood the perfect pose was one in which my breathing was constant, my focus was on my breath, and I was uncomfortably comfortable in each pose. I accepted myself in each pose and surrendered to it. It did not mean I was giving up. No, I was just accepting and surrendering to where my body was and where I was at that very moment. I did not engage in resistance, or that would have led to me hurting myself physically. So I moved with the poses, not against them. And all the time I followed my breath, and in the silence I heard my soul, the one that sat in the space of the script that I was slowly erasing. I took all these lessons I was learning on the mat and took them off the mat and into my day-to-day life. And the more I practiced, I felt my body release the waterfalls of energy that I had trapped in my twisted body and in the energy channels that I had clogged up with negativity. At the end of my practice, I came into Shavasana and surrendered my body to the earth. I gave my body and my mind the space and relaxation to create a new memory of how to move in life, on the mat and off the mat. And then I sat in meditation. By meditation, I mean I sat and just listened to my breath. I did not have to ask the universe for anything, as it could already read everything in the energy I was giving out. Because our energy carries information, so the information I gave out in my energy was reflected in the life I was living. I just had to look around me to know where my mat was taking me, and where it was taking me was a life of awareness. Awareness of all the energy and beauty that surrounded me every day, in every living thing, including humans. As fear receded, love slipped in and took its place. And no matter what, when a door closed for me, another one always opened. The yoga mat saved my life. It humbled me, as I had no choice but to be humble as I moved through the poses that challenged me and reduced me to a state of acknowledging my limitations, and then slowly and patiently moving through them without my ego. Because with my ego, I only hurt myself. The poses I liked the least were to become the ones I felt most connected to and satisfied in, because I had gone through an enormous mental, emotional, and physical journey of surrendering my ego and sitting in acceptance to finally be able to reach a point where the pose no longer felt like a fight, and where I no longer judged myself in them. And each time I stepped off my mat, it became easier and easier to follow the yamas and niyamas of yoga, the guidelines of resistance and observances, so simple and yet so hard to follow in the beginning, until I became yoga and yoga became I. And by that I mean I no longer felt disconnected from everything, but connected to everything. And in that state, I saw and felt so much love and light. If you have followed my story, then you know I met the most unlikely of humans in the most bizarre of circumstances during COVID. In the relationship that has ensued, I've experienced things that I did not know were possible, because of who I had become on my mat. When I stepped into that relationship, I did not step into it from my past, but from my present. Because my past no longer held influence, as I had erased the script, planted new seeds, and took back what was mine, my connection to love and the universe. As such, I was experiencing him through newness, through my energy. Had I held on to my past and all the mental and emotional disabilities it had written into my mind, then I would have experienced him through the filters of my past, and eventually our journey would have ended up looking like my past relationships. And that was something I did not want. Even though I was deeply grateful for all those relationships, even the ones that got me to rock bottom. In the one, I had dated a man who was verbally abusive, cheated, and later on was to die of a brain tumor. It would have been so easy to have blamed him for my rock bottom, but instead he forced me to begin a journey into myself to understand how I had got to the point of zero self-worth, no confidence, and an unhealthy life and body. And what I discovered was a story that had started in me when I was 12. It was in this relationship that I sought out yoga, because our reality does not create us. We are the creators of our reality. I know there is good in every single one of us. Our soul is good. It is just a matter of coming to our mat, wading through all the ignorance the human world has gifted to us, and coming back into knowledge. And in that knowledge, there's no room for fear, for separation. All that resides in that knowledge that sits in our consciousness is love and connectivity to every single living thing on this planet, without attachment. We are all individually and collectively on a journey of self-discovery. Some of us are just more aware of it than others. It is the role of suffering to spark us to overcome it, not through an external shift, but through an internal one. If you want to take that journey, it is a hard one, and the work never really ends. But the magic and love that arises from the mat is endless. And all you have to do is step onto your mat, practice yoga, do the work, and the rest will follow. The work is to come to your mat, to live in the present with awareness, to follow the yamas and niyamas, which are all based on good, to observe, to train the mind to focus, to fall off your mat and know that when you do, to forgive yourself and get back on, to love yourself and others, to surrender to the journey and to trust that the universe will guide you. Because a universe that created such a magnificent world filled with such beautiful energies can only seek to lead you to balance, light, and love. Because really, it can't be worse than the conditioned mind that just keeps trying to sabotage us. Love, the Enchanted Yogi.